Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. We have an atmospheric river flooding California after the worst drought in 1,200 years. We have ice in the Sahara Desert for the fifth time in 42 years. We have airplanes. The FAA shut down all airplanes this week, and even Canada and also the Philippines had the same problem. But we do have good news that now that the stock market exploded, thanks to the expectation now that the central bank in the United States may not raise the interest rates as much as we thought they were going to. Let's go ahead and get started. Biggest news of the week is the cooling inflation this week. It went down to 6.5%. Also, China's reopening its border, so now there's a little bit of an expectation. There's positive news that things are going to start getting better. This basically means that if the central bank in the United States isn't going to increase interest rates as fast as we thought they were going to, then that means that the economy won't slow down as much, because remember that we're in this huge financial bubble where we've had the lowest interest rates in the history of the world, not the history of the US, but the history of the world. That causes huge bubble, because when the interest rates go down, it's much easier for us to buy things. Prices of houses goes up because there's more buyers, because more people can afford them. And so now that they're starting to increase the interest rates, it's starting to slow down the world economy, as not only the US, but also other economies as well. Other central banks are starting to increase the interest rates. In addition to that, China officially reopening its borders. So that second economy, largest economy in the world, that had before a strict zero COVID policy. So if they had one case, for example, they would shut down a city with millions of people. That caused, obviously, the stocks to roar to the upside. Canada was also positive on this side of the world. Overseas market news, European markets mostly positive as well, with the emerging economy of Turkey, the Istanbul stock market being the only one that was negative. Latin America is mostly higher as well. The Merval is still riding on the Argentinian World Cup win. They went up over 13%. Africa and the Middle East, mostly positive as well. And then in the far east, we have the Philippines being the most positive of all, and most of the markets there were mostly higher. Bitcoin and other crypto news. Great news about Bitcoin. It crossed 21,000 right now as I'm recording this video on Saturday. It went up 4.6% to just over 19,000. I always do the cutoff on Friday, by the way. The bad news is that since 2014, 91% of the cryptos have died. And this is one of the things that I always warned you guys about, where I never thought that Bitcoin was necessarily the future. I think that blockchain is the future, because now the new, what I call the government coins, the central bank digital currency, CBDCs, are going to use that technology to be able to go ahead and launch their own digital currencies, government coins. So second largest exchange in the world, FTX, remember, they went bankrupt. They have recovered $5 billion in liquid cash cryptos. In addition to that, there was news that FTX paid for private planes to deliver Amazon packages to the Bahamas, since Amazon doesn't deliver to the Bahamas. It's amazing to have your own business, right? It's just like, hey, Amazon doesn't deliver. Why don't we just send the private jet at, what is it, $10,000 an hour? Crazy. SBF, the founder, the disgraced a-hole, the biggest of the year. Time magazine should do like instead of the person of the year, they should do like the worst person of the year, like a-hole of the year. That would be the founder, Sam Bankman-Fried. There's reports that from the New York NYP, I don't know what that stands for, but they're paying about $10,000 a week for security, according to NYP. And Genesis, which is another crypto lending firm, now is in trouble as well. They've let go 30% of their previous staff before. Now they're cutting down another 20% as they owe over $3 billion to their creditors. Their owner, which is a venture capital conglomerate called DCG, Digital Currency Group, is trying to consider selling some of their portfolio to raise money. The only problem is that they only have 500 million, if I didn't say that right, in assets, while they owe over $3 billion. So it looks like the contagion in crypto is continuing to increase. In addition to that, Celsius is Celsius, if you guys remember, was the company that went bankrupt in this huge crypto contagion. There was a judge that ruled that the money that depositors had, the money that customers had, which is over 500,000 people that put money into Celsius, that isn't their money anymore. It's Celsius's money. So basically the way it works is, and remember, the Coinbase, which is the largest exchange in the United States, also reported that they're ever in a bankrupt situation, that their money isn't the customers either. See the problem with crypto? Now, it's not that you can't make any money, but I mean, you put your money into this financial institution and then, it's not yours if anything happens. Other than that, the SEC is charging crypto firms Genesis and Gemini with an allegedly selling unregistered securities. It's about, some of the products that they were offering as well. And in commodities, there's an egg shortage now due to the avian flu and so many eggs that have been killed, so many chickens, that have been killed. Costco and Walmart has run out of eggs. Eggs also have gone up almost 60% a year over year in December. There were some pretty good memes that were going out saying that, if you want to be a millionaire, there's a guy with a picture raising some eggs and chickens, raising some chickens and eggs, which is always hysterical. Putin plans to weaponize energy with Europe is starting to fizzle now that Europe is going through one of the warmest winters on record. In addition to that, they've done a great job of lowering their consumption of natural gas. And also the Green Party in Germany is now pro-coal. So now they're starting to produce a lot more energy with coal. So we'll see how that ends up. And crude had its largest gain in 3 months this week after recouping its one of the most steepest declines on a weekly basis. Almost a tongue twister there. U.S. crude went up by over 8% to almost $80, and Brent went up almost 8.5%, over 8.5% at over $85. Now, we did have a situation this week since the expectation now that the central bank of the United States isn't going to raise interest rates as aggressively. That means that people want to put their money into the dollar a lot less, because remember that the dollar was the least dirty shirt in the dirty closet. And so we have a situation where if people are losing their demand for the dollar, right? The dollar value goes down, which went down by a lot this week. That's part of the reason why we saw a lot of these stock markets and crude and everything go up. So now because of that, we had a huge tank in the dollar and precious metals exploded. Gold went up by almost 3% to 1921. Silver went up almost 2% to 24.38. And in other good news as well, there's a Swedish state-owned mining company called LKAB, which found the largest reserves of rare earth metals in Sweden, which is the largest in Europe. So now this is going to be great news for Europe, because these rare earth metals, which are rarer than precious metals like gold and silver, they need these to be able to have that green transition, which is great. So now they'll have a place to get it, basically, instead of having to import it from China, since China still exports over 50% of all those rare earth metals. China also is reporting an increase in their gold reserves for the second month in a row. Supposedly, they increased 30 tons in December. I say supposedly because remember that China is the largest miner of gold in the world, and it's illegal to export gold from China. And basically, the government essentially owns it. And there's a lot of analysts that are saying, well, the amount of reserves that China actually has is a lot higher than what they're reporting, because the conspiracy theory out there, is that China is going to launch a reserve currency that's attached to gold and silver to be able to try to take down the dollar. In financial and banking news, after one of the most incredible runs up of prices in used cars in history, we now have the used cars prices dropping by the most on record. As I mentioned to you guys, the US CPI further slowed in December at 6.5%, and the US Treasury Secretary is saying that the debt limit is most likely going to get hit on January 19th. We now have $31.4 trillion of debt, and now Janet Yellen, which is the Treasury Secretary, is saying that she's going to have to do some extraordinary cash management to prevent a default if the government doesn't come to an agreement to raise the debt ceiling. Remember, after the elections, now the government in the U.S. is not controlled by the left completely. The Republicans, which are the right, are now managing the House. So now they're saying that they're going to use that as leverage to try to stop so much spending from the Democrats and the Biden administration, which still controlled the Senate and also the presidency. And it's part of the reason why we're continuing to have this problem with inflation, because they've printed so much money. Inversion on the yields are accelerating, which is more of an indication that we're going to be walking into recession. I don't think that's really any big news, right? And in political news, Bolsonaro plans to flee the United States to Italy and obtain citizenship for himself and his family. Italy now is one of the right-leaning governments in Europe. They're even stopping migrant boats from stopping on their shores. And so there's a situation now that the communist in Brazil won the election. And I say, with a wink, because supposedly it's kind of the same situation with January 6th, where there was Bolsonaro supporters that stormed Congress, the presidential palace, and also the Senate. And so now they have a gulag there in Brazil with the followers. And supposedly they want to try to go after Bolsonaro to blame him for that situation, even though he never said to go and do it. And so he's going to leave the U.S. to avoid extradition to Brazil, because they're going to, now the left-leaning government in Brazil wants to go after him as well. Kind of the same thing with the January 6th stuff and Orange Man. I don't want to say his name so they won't ban this channel too. Biden is in a bit of trouble as well with the classified documents. Supposedly, I think this is a bit of a conspiracy. All of a sudden, they found these documents, and supposedly they knew about them before the election, the presidential election in 2020. So now they're the same thing that supposedly Orange Man did, the previous president of the U.S. Now Biden actually did it too. And I think what's actually happening is that the powers that be that run things in the United States are trying to remove Biden, because he said he wants to run again. So they want to remove him now to be able to have somebody else run, like Gavin Newsom, that literally doesn't have dementia. In economic news, emanating from this year's annual meeting from the American Economic Association in New Orleans, global economy looks to be transitioning to a more difficult era, is saying this association. Interest rates are going to be higher. We're going to have a lot more geopolitical tensions and a lot more uncertainties that are pronounced. Remember, in 2020, during the pandemic, I told you guys the next decade, we're going to have a lot more economic problems, a lot more social problems, and a lot more environmental problems, like the situation we're having in California. Corporate news, Subway, the sandwich company, which isn't as healthy as they say it is looking at a possible sale at a valuation of $10 billion. Salesforce, which is that huge software conglomerate, is looking to reduce 10% of its employees. So now we have Amazon and Facebook and everybody doing these layoffs. Elon Musk's attorneys are asking a California court to move the trial over to Texas in regards to its stock situation. So he's citing, or the attorneys, I should say, are citing that they have local negativity in New York. Remember that Elon Musk was the poster child for the left, and after he bought Twitter and got into politics and started unbanning people that they banned on Twitter, which were right-leaning people, now the left doesn't like him anymore. Tesla has become the sixth largest, best-selling vehicle in the United States, even though the stock is down over 65%. American Airlines has surged over 9%, in addition to United Airlines saying that they're going to have a huge increase in revenue. They're saying, I believe, let me see if I can get the percentages here. Yeah, they don't have the percentages, but I think what's happening is that corporations now are starting to take advantage of the inflation and start to increase their prices a lot more than what inflation is, or the reported inflation anyway. So now the bastards at American Airlines and United Airlines are having huge quarterly and expectations of the results. And so that's what I think is actually happening. Bed Bath & Beyond, their price dropped over 30%. They're now in talks to be bought out by an equity firm called Sycamore Partners in regards to a sale of its assets, since they're planning on going into bankruptcy. And Goldman Sachs, one of the most important banks and brokerages in the world, is also planning over thousands of jobs across the world. Just over 3,000 employees are going to be let go as well. So you can see that all of these corporations are starting to prepare a lot for the upcoming inflation that's coming, the upcoming recession. In technology, we had a huge airline outage over supposedly a software glitch at the Federal Aerospace Administration, the FAA. I'm pretty sure that's what that stands for. There were over 7,000 flights that were delayed, 1,000 that were canceled after they had this grounding of all the airlines. In addition to that, the Canadian flight entry system had an outage in addition to the Philippines. I don't think it was a software outage. Here we go. I think it was the storms, the solar storms and things that we're getting. But we'll talk about that some other time. World's first artificial womb facility where you can literally choose your baby's characteristics from a menu is being launched as well. There's a company called Ectolife, which is gonna start making babies from literally little capsules. I don't know if you guys seen the movie The Matrix. Some of you guys are a little bit younger, may not have seen it, but watch it. There were literally machines that were growing people inside of these similar capsules for supposedly human energy. The heat from the body and the energy, that's how they were generating energy for the machines. Kind of looks a little bit same. It looks very similar. And now they're saying that it's for women that need help to have babies. But obviously, they always try to go overboard with this stuff, right? Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is saying that the government is going to provide up to $80 million in grants for hydrogen projects that are being held out in Spain. And sorry if you guys can hear all the dogs barking. I have 9 little Yorkies here. He's also stressed that 20% of the hydrogen projects in the world are going to be located now in Spain. And in international this week, I talked about the Brazilian January 6th, let's call it, which happened over the last week. Over 500,000 homes and businesses are already out of power with the atmospheric river in California. They've gone from 1,200-year droughts to now literally inundations where you see cars on the street. And because of all the laws and regulations in California, people literally can't catch their own rainwater, so they won't have a problem with water. They're not going to get prepared, right? Commercial plane filled with passengers hit by gunfire after the arrest of El Chapo's son in Mexico. That's pretty scary. And in unusual facts this week, the Sahara Desert in Africa dipped below freezing this week. It's the 5th time in 42 years that has been ice on the desert. There have been temperatures recorded up to 136 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 58 degrees Celsius. Extremely hot, so it's extremely rare to see that ice in the Sahara Desert. And singer Lisa Marie Presley, which is the only daughter of Elvis Presley, has died at the age 54 of what else? A cardiac arrest. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.